Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this channel. My name is Duncan Robert. I am happy that we yet find another week for us to just have a look at what happened last week. And we have a discussion. For those who are here for the first time, this channel is a channel where we educate each other. There is so much information around us, especially concerning the things that affect us on a day-to-day basis. We've had things like taxes. We hear things like the cost of living, housing, infrastructure, roads, and all that. But the conversations are being had at a very high level. And the normal countryman, the normal mwananchi does not really get to understand some of these issues well. We find time in this channel to just break down some of those conversations at a level which we can consume, which we can understand. So if you are joining us for the first time, feel welcome. And I'll go straight into what we are going to discuss this week. There has been a lot of conversations happening around taxes, of course. There has been conversations about the prices of fuel. There is also a conversation around the debt. You've heard a lot about Kenya being indebted, and the government is really using a lot of money to pay debt. And of course, you've heard about the depreciating Kenyan shillings against the dollar. And I want us to start off first by saying these issues are, from where I sit, when you're in your own country, you sometimes get engulfed into the politics and a lot of the things that are happening within the borders. And you forget that the world is a conglomeration of so many other countries. Now, when I normally hear Kenyans complain a lot, I ask myself, is it that our country is doing badly, or are these situations happening across the region? Are other African countries experiencing some of these issues? And therefore, I try to look at those countries to just have a feel of what is happening around. And in the event that I find other Africans are suffering from the same problems, then I kind of feel a bit better. Now, it is also worth noting that the reason why Kenya is where it is today is this ability of the citizens to voice their discomfort. Kenyans speak out whenever they are not comfortable with what is happening. And it has somehow helped to keep our leaders in check. And that is why a lot of the times when you see people visiting our country, they tend to have a very good review of the nation, not knowing that a lot of the noise we make actually goes in a long way to make our leaders feel accountable and to take action. So we just don't love complaining. This is what has made the country what it is. And for that matter, so is it for real that the cost of living in Kenya has been rising steadily for the past 6 months? Yeah. And is it also correct to say that that fuel in Kenya is a bit on the high, is a bit expensive? Is it also fair to say that the Kenyan shillings has been depreciating drastically against the dollar? Is that something to worry about? And therefore, this is my comparison. This is what I found out. I have not done so much about the oil. The oil industry is a bit complicated. We shall come back with a more detailed review of the oil industry and what is happening within that space. But for today, let me give you a review of what I have done concerning inflation. Number one, inflation is a measure of how the cost of living changes over time. And I tried to look at the rate of inflation in Kenya. As of the end of June, inflation stood at around 7.9%. So that means if you had 100 shillings at the beginning of this year, whatever it is that it could have bought you, it can't buy you the same thing right now. You will need to add another 7 shillings on top of the 100 bob for you to be able to access that one thing you could have accessed in January. That is basically what inflation means. I took a look at some of the countries around us, and it's important for us to do that. But one country, of course, surprises me. Tanzania has an inflation rate of 3.6. I will do a very deeper review of that country because I have a feeling there's something they are doing right. I just don't know what. Yeah, Uganda has an inflation of around 4.9%. So our East African neighbors are doing pretty well. Namibia has an inflation rate of around 5.3%. South Africa, 5.4%. Kenya, at 7.9%. Now, Zambia is at 9.8%, then Rwanda is at 20.4%. What is Rwanda doing wrong? Because that inflation of around 20% is quite high. Nigeria at 22.8%. That is quite high, Nigeria. Burundi 28.9%. Ethiopia 29.3%. There are very good conversations happening across Ethiopia, but the inflationary rate is quite high. And of course, Ghana. Guys, please engage me to let me know what is happening in Ghana for the inflation rate to be at around 42.5%. You mean the currency could be, you could be losing almost 42 shillings out of the money that you have within that short period of time? I am asking these questions, but I'll come back with a deeper review of each of these countries so that we're able to understand basically what is happening. And when I try to now look at the currency, the depreciating currency against the dollar, how is devaluation of the currency happening over time? The Malawian kwacha depreciates against the dollar at around 1.8%. That is pretty steady. Tanzania again is depreciating at 2.5%. Mauritius rupee is depreciating at 2.8%. The Zambian kwacha at 9.8%. The Botswana pula, today you're going to know about the currencies, 10.6%. The Rwandan franc at 11.9%. South African rand at around 18.3%. Namibian dollar at around 18.7%. Kenyan shilling at around 19.1%. Burundi franc 38.2%. And Ghanaian cedi at 43%. I don't know what is happening in Ghana, but guys, you can engage me. Let's engage and share knowledge of what is happening around Ghana. So when I look at what is happening across some of those countries that I've mentioned, then you realize Kenya is pretty much somewhere in the middle. Inflation-wise, we are not as bad as actually I thought. That means that we are really pushing our leaders. But Kenya, compared to other countries, of course, it's not the best. The leading economies in Africa, you will most of the time find inflation at a rate of 1%, 1.2%, and only Tanzania then is somewhere closer to that. And in terms of depreciating currency, I think the Malawian kwacha at 1.8% is really stable. And on the other side is Ghanaian cedi. I don't know what is happening to Ghana. But the Kenyan shillings at around 19.1%, and the government has said that it has been steady. So I'm trying to wonder. So guys, when I look at those two aspects, I'm seeing a country that is pretty much in the middle. It's just on the balance. It's not that bad as much as we continue speaking within the borders of the country. But of course, we are Kenyans. We want the best. We will keep pushing our government. Now, guys, I wanted us to have just a view of what is happening around Africa. Those are just numbers. In terms of analysis, we are going to do analysis to see what is, of course, happening. Watch out for my daily show tomorrow. I'll give you a deeper understanding. Now, but the question is, how did we find ourselves in this situation? How have African countries found themselves in a situation where they are complaining about the cost of debt, the amount of debt itself, the repayment of, expectations, the cost of living rising steadily? Yet Africa is a very productive piece of land. Inflation on things like food should not be a case that we continuously hear. And I want to give you just a small history that will introduce us to a very wide topic that we are going to delve deep in the coming weeks. So when World War II came to an end, guys, most of the countries that were fighting really were disappointed of the effects of the World War. And most of these countries found themselves in a situation where unless they cooperated, they wouldn't really have sufficient resources to move ahead. So there was a general understanding for the world to cooperate. And that is how IMF, that is how the World Bank, all those things were put in place to steer the new world order. And after that, because of the inadequacies of resources at that particular time, the strong economies went out to colonize other countries. That is how African countries were colonized. And eventually, of course, through fights, through wars, the African countries were able to gain independence. But after independence, you will have expected that the African leaders will now kickstart a journey of economic recovery and growth in the land of Africa. But what actually happened is the colonizers took advantage of that, and they understood that Africa still had a lot of resources. So once African countries gained independence, the colonizers never left in reality. So they left, but they made sure that they put in place powerful people who are very charismatic, people who had the ability to take charge of the colonies. And as such, they continued working together very closely. Now, whenever two people that were fighting before start working together, collaboration, then you can be sure good and bad things will definitely happen. In the process, African leaders collaborated with post-colonial times now. They collaborated with their colonizers in such a way that they enabled them to continue accessing minerals and resources from the African soil. And as a result, so many wrong things were done. So many criminal activities have happened in the land of Africa. Now, because of that, a lot of resources have left the countries. A lot of resources, even in financial terms, have left the countries. But when you're doing something criminal, you cannot pass the returns or the benefits that you gain out of that through the formal global financial system. So there had to be created a channel through which money can be moving from Africa to the rest of the world. And money found a way of moving out of Africa, not through the global financial system, because that can be tracked. And because of that, over time, people have fought that system over time, and it has just mutated. And it has mutated into something called the offshore world. And people who have an understanding of the offshore system, you know that there is more than even the money that is being transacted in the global financial system happening in the offshore world. So someone will ask me, but how is the offshore world affecting our current situation? How is it having an impact in our current situation? It is having an impact in our current situation because of this thing called debt. A lot of the debt you see in Africa is majorly not money that even came into Africa. We have debt in our books that is supposed to be serviced, and money actually lives in the name of going to service debts. But the money never gets to the places that it was meant to go. The same way, we receive in books, we receive debt from countries abroad. But once the debts have been approved, the money is deposited in accounts that are not national accounts. So many African countries actually have debt in their books that is not really true debt. And I think in the case of Kenya, Jimmy Wanjigi spoke about it the other day, and I don't think people really understand what he meant very clearly. The reality is a lot of the debt we are servicing is not true debt. And in our country, Kenya, that burden is so huge that out of an income that the government generates of around 2.2 trillion, 1 trillion goes into repaying debt. But it is repaying debt that never existed, debt that we never received. Now, how is that tied now into the cost of living? That is where I was coming to. When a government spends a lot of its money to pay debt, it remains with a very small portion of its income to carry on with the affairs of the country. But over time, leaders realize that whatever they remain with is too minimal. And when you lump up together with corruption, the countries become so pressed that now the leaders have to find other ways of making money for the country to move. And like I told you, most leaders don't like fighting corruption. So what do? They go and focus on how much more they can get. Others will go and borrow again. This time round, they will borrow real money that can come into the economy. But in other times, like in the case of our current president, he has chosen to look for that money domestically. And that is where now, domestically, the only way he can make money is through taxes. That is why he is trying as much as possible to expand the tax base, as well as increase some of the taxes that has been there. And that is why you see now people complaining. Now, when tax is imposed on a country, of course, the sellers or the producers will not want to take that burden. They will just push the burden to the consumers. And that is why you see a lot of the goods, eventually the consumer pays. So the consumer will feel the brunt of a change in the tax systems. And that is what is happening. That is what part of it is causing the inflation that you're seeing in our economy today. And guys, that is the answer. That is a summary of what is happening to our country today. But we are going to delve deep into this offshore market. I have a very good understanding of how it operates, and I'm just starting. This is just the start of a series of a lot of conversations around the offshore market and how it is truly affecting the economies of Africa. So yes, so thank you guys. So I think that gives us a starting point. Look out for tomorrow's session, where I am going to now have a discussion on this thing called the offshore market. It is very dangerous, and it has been formalized. So many countries have formalized it and accepted. I'll give you just a parting shot. The city of London is the biggest financial hub in the world, but it is surrounded by very many tax havens. If you don't know tax havens are places where you can deposit money, you can send your money, and they promise you an oath of secrecy. They don't give out information on whatever money that gets into their country. They give you tax incentives that just makes people comfortable with pushing their monies to those specific countries. The city of London is surrounded by tax havens. The US has the biggest number of tax havens around it. And the question is why? Why are these countries having all these tax havens around them, knowing very well what those countries do? Could it be that the world has decided to formalize the offshore market and accept that it is part of the reality? But are we Africans now becoming victims of that because we don't know what is happening? Or even if we know, our leaders have decided to be part of that process. So today we just wanted to understand what happened last week. And it is very clear that Kenyans, we continue pushing our leaders, yes, but the situation in our country is not as bad. It is the same scenario across so many other African countries. If you feel bad, think about Ghana, that has a current inflation of around 42.5%. And then think about, again, the Ghanaian cedi is depreciating at almost 43% against the dollar. I can only imagine if that were to happen in Kenya. But you are doing a good job just putting our leaders in check. And that is the reality of what is happening around. Thank you very much, guys. Just remember to subscribe to this channel. Remember to share. Remember to be part of this amazing. There is so much that is coming in this channel, and I cannot wait for us to continue having meaningful conversations that are going to change our lives, definitely.